I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli remains on vacation. Andrew Kuo remains taking no days off. Mr. Andrew Kuo, how are you on this drizzly Thursday afternoon?
I'm amazing. I have not been eliminated from my own bub yet, so I'm still alive. Win another game. I'm crossing off X's on my win chart. You sound like you just had a delicious carb-on-carb breakfast, man. Can you let the listeners in on the saga of your pie line?
Last week, as our Patreon subscribers know, I made an accusation against a local establishment that they were selling pies. Thought they were selling pies. I was walking around, looking at this line of people queued up, scoffing at them while secretly envious of whatever pies they were taking home. Turns out, it's not a pie place at all. They're making bagels over there.
Wow. Because it is at Paulie G's pizza shop, which has a brick oven, right?
It does seem to be the case. So I was walking around this morning. I was like, I'll get some coffee, strolling around the neighborhood. And as I left the house, I thought, you know what? Let's not go carbing this morning. No carbs. Not like a concern over carbs, but maybe we don't get a croissant. Maybe we don't get a little slice of cake. No treats for breakfast. 10 minutes later, I'm carb-on-carbing with a bacon, egg, and cheese that, little did I know, had a potato pancake inside of it.
That's just tremendous, man. So it turns out it's a Sixers fan pop-up catered to fans of the Philadelphia basketball team.
I not only went carb, I went carb-on-carb.
That's awesome. How was it, man? Sounds amazing.
It was fantastic.
I mean, you sent me a picture, and I was lusting after that sandwich.
I thought you would appreciate it. I tried to DM one to the real Elton.
You don't want to derail his focus. You want him to stay razor sharp in his off-season maneuvering.
He's reevaluating the Sixers front office that now includes only 2 other people. That's the funniest part about the Sixers' whole off-season imbroglio is that Brett Brown is fired and Mark Eversley left. So there's just 3 guys. Like, we're reevaluating. Like, okay. It's not an Algonquin round table anymore. It's just 3 dudes. I digress.
Well,
wonderful breakfast sandwich at a place called Edith's, I want to say. And it's a pop-up at Paulie G's pizza place at the ass end of Greenpoint Avenue.
The butt end, the wagon of Greenpoint Avenue.
Unless it's the start. I don't really know how that works.
True.
It could be the snakehead of Greenpoint Avenue, or it's the taint.
Or it's a carb-on-carb centipede.
So I might be taking a nap, even if we're not talking about the Portland Trailblazers. I'm just going to be frank.
Well, it looked amazing, and the saga of your line judgment continues, and it turned up today.
From pies to potato pancakes.
Awesome. I love Jewish food, man.
Yeah, that's exactly what this place is. It's a kosher deli.
There was bacon in the sandwich, though? I'm confused about that. Was it some kind of version of bacon? Was it like a brisket bacon or something?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't see the menu by the time I was up there, so I kind of panicked. You know when you're expecting pie. They're like, ooh, do I go blueberry? And then I just look, I'm like, bacon, egg, and cheese, bagels. And I was just staring there with the woman working at the counter.
Yeah.
And I just looked at the menu and literally just pointed at the first thing.
Are you a member of the bagel scene in New York? I know there's people who care a ton about bagels, somewhat care about bagels, and don't care about bagels at all. Where do you stand?
I think I used to care about bagels, but they're so remorselessly carby that I sort of opted out of the bagel community.
Wow.
I don't know. I think like Black Seed has good bagels. I think there's good bagels to be had. Mm-hmm. Where are you on this? You sound like you're part of the bagel community.
I'm a bagel tourist, but I like a good bagel, but I don't know. So I went to Murray's Bagels on the west side for the first time in years, and I got the classic, like smoked salmon, tomato deal. That's a lot of food, man. Like, you mess around, and there's like 2 meals there. This goes back to my hottest Twitter take of all time, which is 90% of sandwiches are too big. I got this sandwich, and it was basically like a softball, man. Full, I scooped toasted. I did all the things I usually do. I'm a cinnamon raisin guy, man. I know.
Your cinnamon raisin salmon bagel scooped too
sweet.
big. I mean, your hot takes kind of are like California wildfire level when it comes to bagels in New York.
California raisins, baby. I love that sandwich. It's sweet. It's savory. I enjoy it. But it was a lot. Murray's Bagels, delicious. I loved it. But I usually go to the Bialy spot, Kozar's in the Lower East Side. That place is pretty great. I went to the Vampire Weekend, like all-day show where you show up and they gave bagels to everyone, and then it progressed to pizza. And the bagels were from Essa Bagel, which people love and claim. I thought they were pretty good. It's hard to serve that many people at a remote location like that, but Essa Bagel is kind of always all right. So I need to get educated in my bagel scene knowledge.
As someone who lived in Williamsburg for, I don't know, well over a decade, my bagel experiences were mostly centered on the 2 places that were in that neighborhood for a long time. So I don't really consider myself an expert on the New York bagel scene. So I feel like we're both sort of at a loss here.
Well, you lived in the home of the Rainbow Bagel, which is probably the most famous bagel.
Yeah, there used to be lines going down 2 blocks. I've never had one. I think it looks really gross.
I'm curious about it. There's a Pablo Torre feature. I think if you Google image search Pablo Torre, buddy of the pod, he's eating one of those Rainbow Bagels. Chilling, you would say.
Oh, I thought you meant chilling as in like a terrifying image.
Both. Yes, that is exactly what I meant.
A bone-chilling photo of Pablo Torre eating a rainbow bagel.
A rainbow bagel. What do you get in your bagel, man? Quickly, last bagel question.
I mean, if I'm getting salmon and I have salmon, like, yeah, the salmon, cream cheese, throw in like some dill, a little squeeze of lemon, some red onions. I mean, if we're going with the works, you're going with the works. Otherwise, just like regular cream cheese.
Yeah, so I do tofu sometimes, but that's chalky if you're not in the right mood.
Unbelievable.
I mean, we're talking about food in New York City because there has been food news here. Your boy, your best friend, your dude, the guy in your life, Bill de Blasio, has hooked us up with a new development.
At long last, indoor dining back.
Woo!
The funny thing is, I've been so resistant to indoor dining because it seems to lead to COVID cases. And I didn't really realize that more or less everywhere else in America has had it except for us.
I know, and we are almost, and not officially, but we're close to herd immunity at this point. All the NYU kids coming through kind of throws a wrench into things, but we seem to be, as a New York City community, we seem to be good. But indoor dining would affect people coming in who don't have it, who might get it.
You'll probably get some pushback to your "we have herd immunity" theory.
Oh, for sure. I mean that it's been rumored and murmured about, but it's not official. But I've heard scientists and doctors say it. So we are not at herd immunity at all. But
Well, you are walking this back rapidly.
Well, yeah, because I don't want to be unsafe. But it turns out COVID was probably here in December. So we had been dealing with it for a while. I mean, I did not feel great in January. I think. Who knows, man? We'll never know.
I would also say that our stable case rate of, I don't know, what is it about? It's been roughly about 3 cases per 100,000 people for a couple months, is probably also tied to the fact that we haven't had indoor dining or indoor
True.
bars. So this to me is it's a risky endeavor, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hand wringing over it for good reason. I also think that I'm a bit of a pessimist about when we're going to be clear of COVID, and I think we do need to start figuring out what levels we can maintain survival of restaurants and bars and places that we care about while not plunging into a second wave. To just shut everything down indefinitely until there's a vaccine might be 5 years, it might be forever. Not trying to be like that negative, but I do think it makes sense to say, can we open places up at a limited capacity, let these places survive for the winter, and hopefully still not see like a massive surge that claims a lot of lives and puts us back into the dark days of March.
Yeah, it's a risky proposition because we have to give these restaurants a chance, and there is no more money in the city, so they have to figure out a way to generate it themselves. And I don't know if having, as we always say, I don't know if having 10 to 15 or even 5 chairs outside can float your overhead, but scientifically it's like a weird spot to be in, right? Because it seems reasonable to try, and it seems reasonable to assume it might not work. And the upside is it works, and restaurants can kind of like stave off the impending closure for a few months. But the downside is death, always.
Some of my friends who work in the restaurant world are kind of like, why is there even going to be a capacity limit? Just fuck it. Just open up again. Like, why even bother? If we're going to be in a closed environment with an air transmittable virus floating around, like, just open up the whole damn place.
That doesn't work, though. Every little thing, like if there is spacing, we found out that works. If they put up little barriers, we can't go back to normal yet. I think.
I'm not even advocating for that. I'm saying I think the opinion on people who work in that industry and rely on it is probably split. You certainly have some people who are like, I'm not comfortable at all, and other people who are like, just open it. Let's go back to normal as much as we can.
Well, that's such a human thing, right? Like, because we're all Michael Porter Jr.'s in our head. Like, give me the rock. I can win this game for us. Someone needs to protect us from ourselves at every point. If left to my own devices, I would just be the dumbest eater. I would just do the dumbest things. And I think people who know things that aren't restaurateurs, who are maybe scientists, have to tell us what to do, even if it doesn't always ring true.
Yeah, can we adjust the ventilation systems to be safer? There was that study of a restaurant, I believe it was in China, where they showed 6 tables and how the air conditioner seemingly moved COVID around the restaurant. Mm-hmm. And people at the same table as the sort of, I guess, first case, the person who was the bearer of COVID, they mostly got it. Then people who were sort of downwind from the air conditioner got it. And then it's speculated that the air bounced off of the back wall, went back the other direction, and then infected the people who were right next to the air conditioner. But people on the other side who were not affected by this airstream did not get COVID. I'm with you that limiting the amount of people in a restaurant would seem to just naturally cut down of the amount of people who potentially could get it, but also in a spatial breakdown of a restaurant would keep people separate.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, just based on that study, you're like, all right, there's less people downwind of each other. We can sort of pay attention to ventilation. I don't know. It seems like an imperfect solution to a no-win situation overall.
I agree. I think where I stand with this is I support them for trying. You got to try something, and I think something here is reasonable. I am not ready to try it myself because there's people around me who depend on me, and I would prefer not to get sick. But I think, yeah, what are you gonna do, man? Your boy Cuomo he's out of options. I watched that press conference with him a couple days ago where he was railing against Trump because he has no other options. He's got no more money and no more moves because the White House has cut off funding, federal funding to certain cities, including New York, as a show of force. And that affects like trash on the street. That affects money that goes to resources. Here we are.
Also, at the same time, if there's indoor dining in Jersey and there's indoor dining in like Yonkers, maybe, depending. Like, I don't see why New York City would be held to a different standard. Yeah, like, again, this is me neither advocating or against it. Just that why would New York City be the only place in the United States where you can't eat indoors?
As just devil's advocate, I agree with you. I've heard people say that New York City is like no other city in America because we're so stacked. We're a super city. There is no other super city in New York City. Like it's more like Hong Kong than LA. So anything that goes bad here has catastrophic results. Could have catastrophic results, whereas Yonkers and White Plains probably would not.
Wow, that's true to an extent. I mean, you look at a city like Seoul, it's even denser than we are.
Oh, but their policies are completely different. Like, they shut down, like, hard. So if we're going to try to, like, halfway crook this thing, I think the risk for New York City is different than the risk for Seattle or Portland or Dallas.
I think there's truth to that. I don't know. I'm not that comfortable myself saying I'm going to go eat inside restaurants. I think it comes down to the numbers. Like, yeah, we know it's around. Can we have this go for a month and see no uptick? If that's the case, then I'm like, okay. We know the risk is there, but if the numbers stay stable and we don't get outbreaks all over the place, but I think that's also inevitable. That's going to happen, right?
One would assume so, yeah.
Like, at some point, someone who has it will be in a restaurant and give it to other people. Like, it's just going to happen. Mm-hmm. It mostly comes down to, can that happen few enough times for this policy to be a success overall? One other thing I wanted to bring up, though, about Cuomo here is, what is this thing with, like, bars can't really reopen unless they're serving food? Is that real, or is that just a continuation of the sort of nonsensical outdoor policy, which is kind of a continuation of the entire nonsensical policy that bars should also serve food? Like, why are we doing this? What's this about?
I think, and Cuomo, I think, I've had more sympathy with him in the last few days because there is no money. So he is trying desperately, even for his own political profile, to do something, and he kind of is run out of pieces. But I feel like the food attached to the liquor policy is something that you could maybe say, like, well, it's to generate tickets, and tickets are money, like parking tickets, that kind of thing. Also, I don't think he knows what he's doing. This is like, all of this is nonsensical a little bit. A virus is sensical. It makes sense. And this virus is lenient to us only in that it is predictable. Everything else, this is very confusing. We're running up to an election where the president is making an example out of Cuomo in New York City. So I stopped thinking about that part of it because there is no reasonable answer, right?
That's my thing. I mean, I know that Cuomo and them are just playing this by ear. Like, I mean, that's a fact. They're not.
I think we all are. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm saying, we know this. They're not. This isn't based on science. Well, if you sit in a restaurant, and you're spaced apart by 25% capacity, and you can't drink beers, and you have to have food, then you're not going to get like it. It doesn't make any sense. There's no logical scientific reason for saying people should also have to have food in a restaurant or in a bar.
They're just, some person came up with it and they're just going with it. I mean, like we said before, we've had for years we've had friends who opened up restaurants that had to serve food, and they just had a pile of chips for 25 cents.
Yes.
So it's just like this arbitrary thing that's been a cultural presence in New York, being like, well, what are you guys serving? It's like, you can have these pretzels.
I feel like we should be past that. And that's why I'm irked even more by these little Cuomo decrees. I'm like, this is just stupid, man. Grow up. We're adults.
Well, the
we
limited...
we live through, being the epidemic globally of COVID. And there's restrictions that you have to eat sandwiches inside of bars. Like, shut up. Just shut up. Let us be adults.
Yeah.
If you want to have curtails on the amount of people who can be in a space, absolutely go for it. But like, stop being a baby. Stop treating us like infants. Oh, I think if you can't have sandwiches, it's going to lead to people just drinking. And if people are just drinking, shut up.
Also, an easy solution would just to have sandwiches. Like, I know bars that just keep a loaf of bread and some cold cuts in the fridge with their like limes. They're like, yeah, we're selling those for $3. I'm like, that seems easy. It's like, yeah, we're just complying. But
this rule apparently seems to be that you have to order food in order to drink in an establishment. Like, why are you doing that? It's just nanny government.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've opted out of that, but like, to me, it doesn't make sense. It's like limiting the number of like liquor licenses within a square, like a vicinity, like on a block there can only be 2 or 3, and this is all arbitrary designation. I remember one time I ordered a sandwich from Iona, this bar near your old house, and they were like, we just ran out of stuff. Can you go across the street and buy the stuff for your sandwich and bring it back? And they didn't. I had to pay for the sandwich. They're like, hey, listen, if you want one, you're going to have to buy the stuff. It was kind of a weird experience.
I guess what irks me most about this is it falls in line with the same thing that colleges are doing. Okay, we're going to reopen, and we're going to put people in danger because we want your tuition money, but we're going to expel the students who partied. We're going to keep your money, but you're booted out, and we're going to shame you. We're going to blame partiers. We're going to blame socializers. And this is exactly the same kind of thing that irks me with Cuomo. You are making a bold decision to put people in harm's way by opening up indoor dining. Whether or not it's a good idea or not, whether it's a necessity or not, it is absolutely a risky and somewhat dangerous move. I mean, it is a dangerous move. We know this from everything that's happened everywhere else. We know it's dangerous. And he has this little clause in there. Oh, because you know who's going to cause problems? It's the drinkers. The people who don't want to have a good meal inside. They're just going to be in a bar. It's this little moralizing that everyone does, blaming people who want to socialize. And it inevitably blames young people and punches down for decisions that are about economics. And, COVID has been about balance of government, safety, and economics, public health policy. That's what this is about. And everyone wants to intentionally shift the focus to being about young people who socialize and, are having beers in the street instead of just keeping their head down, going to the supermarket and heading on back home. And this just feels like more of the same.
To New York's credit, though, this is no Sturgis. Like, we, it's hard to say, and I think we all did a good job to get to this point, and it's hard to say, but it was ridiculous. Like, we are, do the means justify these ends? Because Cuomo has done things that I don't agree with either, especially that stuff. But he got us here, it's weird. I don't know what the playbook was for all this, and I think he did some things that I wouldn't have done. But he got us here. And if he's going to get mad at people from out of state coming in and partying, that makes sense too.
I'm just saying that we know who the culprits are. And it's not street beers. It's not going to be people who are in a bar. It's going to be the fact that you opened up restaurants for indoor dining. That's what the culprit is. Anyway, it just falls in line with this idea of always seeming to find the same exact target. Whether you're a university, you're a Cuomo, everyone always blames the same people. young people with a beer. That's the the real problem here.
So I kind of want to shift this conversation to something I've been thinking about. Is like,
I love it.
has this affected some of your friendships? Like, I have basically told my close friends that I'm probably staying home. I'm gonna go out for sure to visit somebody if I hadn't seen them for a while, or if it's kind of half work, if it's a birthday. Maybe if it's a birthday. So what I'm getting at is I've kind of reached a tension point with some of my friends who are like, yo, I'm down the street from you. Let's get a socially distanced drink. I'm like, I'm not quite doing that. And like, well, what, you don't want to see me? And I'm like, no, maybe. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not willing to risk that. Like, I have a lot of Virgo friends who are having birthdays, and I'm kind of trying to get out of all of them.
I mean, do you want me to tell you the truth?
Yeah,
I
of course.
I love you, Andrew. I think I do. I love you. You're my guy.
Yeah.
I do think that people need to be better friends.
Yep.
I do feel like that about some people who, like, I used to hang out with all the time, who now have just retreated inside and said things like this.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, we know the numbers. There's outdoor dining. There's going to be indoor dining. The subways are open. Things are as normal as they're probably going to be right now for the next 6 months. And for people to say, I'm not comfortable seeing you, even if it's just standing on the street, that's wild to me. Like, it really is.
That's interesting.
I judge friends like who won't come out of their house. I do. And I get it. There's a lot of things that are compacted here. There's anxiety. There's agoraphobia. There's PTSD.
There's disinterest.
There's disinterest. There's a pandemic. Like, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Right.
So I'm not like, motherfucker, get out of your house. But I am like, if after 6 months and all these things are happening, people still just are like, well, I don't want to, I'm not comfortable seeing other people. Like, why not?
Like
why? It just doesn't, I can't think like that. Of course, I want to see all my friends.
What I've learned, especially, it was kind of brewing before this, and COVID kind of accelerates everything. Is you don't ask your friends why. You don't do that to your homies because they're your homies. And maybe for an example would be if someone stopped drinking, but they didn't really want to tell everybody they stopped drinking. And it's like, yo, come to this bar. We're meeting at 11, being like, oh, I have something to do, but I'll hit you up tomorrow or something like that. Like, I've learned just through so many friends going into AA that, like, you don't ask why from your friends. They're just your friends. You don't ask them to explain themselves.
I mean, I think that's a fair point. I also think if you don't make any effort to see your friends, even on terms that may be more acceptable, then, like, you're kind of letting them down.
I mean, that's fair. It's like, let's say you talk to your friend and it's their birthday and you wish them a happy birthday. And you're like, well, we're getting drinks uptown. And you're like, I probably won't be doing that. Like, that is not quite letting a friend down. Who is letting who down is my question.
I don't know. Doesn't being a friend require, like, some effort, though? Isn't that, like, part of the deal?
Yeah, so the person who's having the party requires the effort to be like, oh, this is not cool for one of my friends, and that's okay with me. That's the real effort. Showing up is easy. Trying to understand how your friend thinks is harder and takes more effort, right?
That's true. But, I mean, we're specifically talking about right now, and we're talking about COVID, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, when you say, well, why? Well, we know why.
We don't. We never know really why.
I mean, if we saw a massive behavioral shift, and I'm not also, this is not just me talking about you. I'm talking about a group of people. Like, I know a lot of people in New York who are still, like, inside hiding. And I'm like, well, what's this about?
Well, and hiding is the wrong word, right?
Well, I disagree. I think it's the exact right word. It's hiding. But it's not sheltering in place. It's not lockdown. It's hiding.
But
it's
they've
hiding
gone
from
through.
Go ahead.
They've gone through a traumatic event, right?
Absolutely. And as I said, specifically. There's a lot to unpack. And that's why I'm not like that judgmental about it. But I do think if people are in hiding right now, it's worth wondering, it's not my business, but it's worth them wondering, like, what is this? What's going on here? Are you scared of outside? Are you scared of other humans? Are you scared of just COVID as this idea versus it being around here in 3 out of 100,000 people? Like, what exactly is keeping people inside and from seeing their friends or socializing? That to me is the bigger question. And that's not for me to unpack. That's for individuals to look and say, what has caused my behavior to shift so far in a different direction that I live a completely different way due to COVID? And why is that? And how do I come out of this? How do I go back to being a normal member of society?
I think, those are all good questions. And I was thinking the other day, like, how has COVID changed me forever? And I always say this word, like, I cannot unsee what I've personally seen, and that may be less or more than the next person. But I think what has changed in me is I decided to just be like 3, 4, 5% nicer. Like, I think not getting mad at people for the things I used to get mad at, like standing in the wrong place in line or walking in my way or my friends acting the way they need to act. It's just like, do your thing, man. Like, we're good. If we're not good, that's fine too. Like, if you don't want to see me because you don't like me, or if you don't want to see me because something is uncomfortable to you, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, again, these are not questions that I'm demanding an answer for. I think it requires some self-evaluation. I mean, there's people who are, like, I know, who haven't left their house. I was at a barbecue going away thing like last week, and there was someone there wearing like 2 masks, a visor, like a hazmat suit, and staying 7 feet away from everybody, while other people are kind of just sitting at picnic tables. So people are in all different stages. And I have other friends who I'm super tight with who were in hiding and then came out and went to restaurants to eat outside like 5 times in 7 days. I'm like, oh my God, I'm back. I lost my mind there for a while. Now I'm back to being normal. This is going to take people coming out of their cocoons and their trauma at different paces. Some people were not affected by this substantially. Other people, it might be for their entire lives. There's no rule book here that says you have to do it at certain times. And I'm not even demanding that. I'm more saying, I think people should think about what exactly is keeping them from trying to resume at least a semblance of the life they had before.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. You can't unsee it. Like, we talk about people moving out of New York. Like, I think that is a move that I didn't choose to do, but I understand why people did, and it's awesome. Like, life is good if you want it to be, and like, if you like the Hudson, sounds great, and I wouldn't have fun there. And the goalposts are moving so fast where, in my brain, it was very recent that we had to lock down and make sure.
It was not long ago.
Yeah, and then overnight it was like, it's what it seemed to be overnight was like, oh, it's kind of, you can eat outside now. I'm like, great. It's like, now you can eat inside. I'm like, can I still go to, a barbecue? And it's like, yeah, you can do that now. I'm like, but memories and brains and risk adversity work in all different ways, right? And to ask people to behave differently at such a breakneck speed is a challenge in itself.
I think some people mentally did get sort of trapped in like March and April because it was really gnarly in New York City. It was really scary. And people walked around outside and it was terrifying. And it seemed like everything that you knew and loved had turned poisonous. And we talked about this on those like 40 pods that we dropped.
Sure.
And when we talked specifically about this, the feeling of walking down the street and seeing someone and being repelled and them clearly feeling the same way, like two, magnets with the same polarity, just bouncing off each other and staying, within 10 feet of each other on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I think personally, as someone who was trying to leave the house and get out and see things and driving meals to the hospital and driving around the city and just being very open to trying to see what was happening outside of, my apartment, and also having the luxury of being able to do it in a vehicle, which is a lot different from being boots on the ground in some ways.
Oh yeah.
I think seeing the way the city incrementally got better and how it matched with the numbers and how the city sort of came back to life gradually was really a mental edge, because it didn't seem as if we were doomed. And going to the doctor or speaking with doctors at the hospital when I was dropping off their dinners and lunches, and them saying, way better today, way better. Right. Oh, no deaths. And then recently the doctors saying, who I've spoken with, saying, oh yeah, no COVID cases in the last month. I haven't seen anyone, not one. It really did make it more of a slope than this sort of binary, is outside toxic and poisonous and scary, or is it all good? Yeah. I think I've been able to navigate that decently.
For sure. And and we're proud of where we are now as New Yorkers. But we got here because of those few weeks. And sometimes it takes a binary way of thinking to do something. I don't want to pay my taxes, I just have to pay them. That's a binary thing in my life. When the COVID thing happened, I do want to pay my taxes, but it's tough because they're very expensive sometimes for my tiny budget. But I think in order to get to this point, we had to convince people it was binary. And I think, the lasting effect of COVID will be complicated. But I think what we're not talking enough about is this mild anxiety people have of being snitched on, of being accused of something, of being judged by their friends, of feeling survivor's remorse. All these things kind of will bubble up in some way. And I don't know what form that will take, but I think every single human being in America will have to deal with that.
And it's a lot easier for, I guess, sort of, when I say us, I'm kind of talking about the media, sort of the consensus, to point and laugh at, the hick who screams, I'm not going to wear your mask in a Walmart and right. Gets carried out by security. We can look at those outliers and be like, what is wrong with these people, the anti-maskers? But it's a lot more difficult to sort of address people who have gone totally into hiding, and people who are as I said, wearing two masks and a visor, because they're not hurting anything. But it's also a different form on the other side of the bell curve to be well, what about them? Are they going to be like this forever? Yeah. And we don't really address them because you don't really want to laugh at them. And they also have the moral high ground. Well, I'm being safe. I don't know about you. So the outliers on both sides are worth thinking about. Yeah. But we only make fun of the Trump voters.
I mean, I just think we should be less like police officers and not ooh, you're taking the moral high ground on me at this barbecue. I'm just whatever, man. He's going through something. They're going through something.
I think it was exactly like that. People were wow, he looks kind of sick. He looks like an astronaut. No one was mocking the person. Yeah. No one, I don't know. This person may have had, be at super physical risk if they get COVID. I have no clue. But yeah, everyone was totally understanding that you go through this at different rates.
Yeah, and that's kind of the answer to my own question. It's I need to be less of a friend cop, because being less of a friend cop is being a better friend, right? So if you don't want to see me, all good. If you do want to see me, cool, that is our responsibility, I think.
I mean, I also think it's worth saying, be a good friend.
But that's what I mean. To me, having that kind of I hate this word, empathy, but like being able to put yourselves in your friend's shoes is the ultimate thought. Being like, yo, you won't come and see me is, to my opinion, is a bit more binary.
I mean, again, I think it just goes the other way. Also,
Yeah.
it's like, well, if you're completely uncomfortable being outside, maybe you should wonder why and say, wait a minute, I can probably tough this out. I can probably go outside despite the fact that I don't really want to do it. I think it just goes both ways, and it's about communicating it.
Yeah, and it's about adversity, because toughing it out isn't quite how this virus works, right? Like
But
getting
it's
on
not
a
about
subway.
it's not about like manning up. I just mean we know what the numbers are. If people are unwilling to like meet up with friends right now because they're like worried about COVID, like you're worried about what, 3 out of 100,000 cases? And everyone's wearing a mask, and if you meet on the street, I mean, like when my friends who I haven't seen like since this started at all are like, yeah, maybe we could meet out and sit on like a park bench somewhere like 6 feet apart and wear a mask. I'm like, yo, come and see me when you're like ready to like, be normal.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm no offense, and I'm not saying let's do some reckless shit and like drive around in a car and hotbox. I'm just like, I'm not doing like the sit 20 feet apart and wear masks outside.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't care about that right now. Like, let's go have dinner.
I think, and society accounts for all these ways of thinking. New York City accounts for it. So, if Cuomo or De Blasio is saying that people who want to eat inside can soon, there will be people inside for sure, and there's going to be people who don't want to be inside, and we're all our truest scientists at this point, right? We all think we are correct in what we're doing, and our trying to figure that out is correct in a way for each one of us. And I think if people, that's why I say the goalposts are moving so fast. It's like has your head spinning a little bit to get into the mental space of not being, in the subways and on the buses. If that it takes that mental gymnastics to go over that bar, then coming back from it would take an equal amount.
I think the crux of this is that we're trying to go back to how we were when COVID arrived and created mayhem without there being a solution to that mayhem. I think that's the sort of crux of the problem. It's like, hey, let's go back to normal, but COVID still exists and we don't have a vaccine.
Right.
Like, yeah, but remember what happened before? Yeah, sure, but it's different now.
Yeah, and man, I mean, the information coming out is so weird, and it's not even politicized. We're not even getting into the Woodward portion of this, but I think, man, just like everyone just be a little bit cooler, and in my opinion, which isn't the coolest, is letting people off the fucking hook, man.
And my thing is, be a little cooler. See your friends.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I think be a little cooler is the solution to everywhere.
I think so.
Should we bother talking about the Woodward book?
I mean, we got derailed a bit. I just think it's hilarious, and I have kind of also opted out of it. But, yeah, all of it seems like Joe Biden shouldn't bother debating anyone and just let this stuff unravel.
The thing with the Woodward book, which he recorded conversations in which Trump acknowledged that COVID was deadly, that it was going to kill a lot of people, that it could affect young people, that it was far worse than the common flu, and then he publicly said completely different things. I don't really know what to take away from that, because we know that Trump lies constantly. So the revelation that he knew, well, of course he knew. He sat there in meetings with all these people, and the same people in those meetings went and sold off all their stocks. Like, of course he was told this stuff. No shit. So the fact that he would say it publicly, I guess this is a smoking gun, but that he believed something different than what he said. But who's even to say what he believes? Because I think what Trump believes is just what he wants to be true. After he goes public and says it's just like the flu, at that point I think he might believe that it's equivalent to the flu, because he says something and then it gets parroted back to him a million times, and his entire team argues on the merits of whatever bullshit comes out of his mouth. So I don't know. I didn't really take anything away from this other than I guess it's a bad day for Trump media wise. I don't know.
I only watched Fox when it dropped. CNN had it first, and after an hour of kind of consume all that information, I switched to Fox, and it was hilarious, man. And cable TV is just cable. Cable news is cable news, always. It's the BMM times 25. But it was interesting in the way that they basically said that. They were like, oh, come on, another thing, another book, another quote. And this one's on the record, like you can hear him saying it. But, they took the stance of he actually has done more. I wish they took the stance of like, he's been consistent throughout this thing. He has been playing this down. He's trying to, and they're switching to the calm thing, keeping people calm. But there's a million ways to frame like what Jason Tatum is.
Trump, notorious for a calming influence.
Well,
if there's one thing that Donald Trump loves, it's Gen X tranquility.
Well, he admitted that he can't do it, right? So that was kind of the roundabout conversation. It's like, I didn't want to send people into a panic because he's the one that sends people into panics,
That's what he does.
It's literally what he does. So, the response was like, you don't have to send people into panic. People will be worried, but like, there's reason to worry. 200,000 people died. But I like his Michael Porter Jr. aspect of his take, which is, without me, it would have been more. So what I did, maybe it's not quite Porter Jr., but basically he was saying like, I am always peak me, so whatever I do prevents the bad thing from happening, which is like a cool life view, I guess,
Like this entire discussion, it's valuable to have because there's recording. Do I think that Woodward holding this information and putting out in his book is like self-serving? Of course. At the same time, there's other things like, the federal government under Trump has like executed more people than like, I'm going to get the number wrong, but like over the last 50 years combined.
Yeah.
Like there's just horrible stuff going on, and getting caught up in like Trump's, foibles of his personality and his lies. Like it's all important and we can multitask, but you just see a stat like that and you're like, there's 55,000 people in captive along the border and like by ICE, 55,000 people. I don't know. I'm not trying to get us to prioritize. I just think like one of Trump's greatest gifts is the ability to distract us with his bullshit.
Yeah, and one of the media's greatest gifts, right? And I don't want to be like the media. I think like you got to look at all this news with kind of a certain eye, and it takes a skill that I don't quite have. But opting out of things, I think I recommend that for everybody at any point. I love figuring out what I think is the most important in something and just leaving it all, the rest of it slide away. But there's a lot going on, and November is going to be really a lot to take in. But I mean, what is this vaccine even? Like this is going to be something that will be important that I think we should all think about. And maybe him being the biggest doofus in front of a microphone I've ever seen is something I stopped thinking about.
Yeah, same. Personally, I'm not going to really care about the election until we're like in October. I've just opted out of getting worked up about polls, getting optimistic about polls. I don't care. That doesn't mean that I don't care about the election. I do, of course, but I'm not going to get caught up in the horse race that seems to be the media's intention during every single election cycle.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they got it. It's a business, man, and
I mean, of course, the last thing they want is it to be boringly, yeah, Biden's going to win. Let's just cruise into the election. No,
Yeah.
That's
It's a for-profit business.
It's a job.
Yeah, they want to keep their jobs. They want to be interesting. Like the NBA would not really survive with 29 Portland Trailblazers, right?
I'm sorry. Did I just eat a massive potato-filled bacon, egg, and cheese? Or did you mention the Portland Trailblazers?
It seems like I was just in a coma. Are the Knicks champions yet? Is LaMelo Ball and Fred VanVleet going up into the rafters?
Well, speaking of basketball, moving along from the president, the playoffs are rolling along at a very rapid pace. We've discussed the intricacies of trying to cover it. But one thing we know, and that will not change, is that the Miami Heat have eliminated the Milwaukee Bucks. So we can talk a little bit about the Bucks here. And then we can get into some of the playoff series that are still rolling along. The Milwaukee Bucks had the best record in basketball. Fantastic defensive team for the second year in a row. Very good offensive team. Giannis won Defensive Player of the Year, which was a farce, and will almost certainly win MVP, which is less of a farce. So they lost in 5 games, during 2 of which he did not play, and they lost all 3 in which he did. He's a free agent after this coming season. If you are the Bucks, what is your approach right now? How do you walk away from having 2 dominating teams that did not even make it to the finals? What do you do now?
Just because it's Milwaukee, you have to ask him right now if he wants to extend his contract. And you have to throw the maximum money at him, right? You don't let him walk away, not in Milwaukee, not anywhere. I know the failures may seem loud now, but you can't let a player like that walk away.
It's a tough situation, a tough scene. Because as much as I make fun of the Bucks, and I don't think that Giannis would have, I don't think that Giannis should be diminished as a player because of their postseason performances. I think Giannis was great. You know, he does things that I don't love, like chucking up 7 3-pointers in a game and going 0 for 7. But Giannis was really good. You know, performance-wise, he was really good. It's an impossible situation if you're Milwaukee, because what he could bring back could save you from plunging into decrepitude as a franchise. But do you want to give up on the idea that Giannis will come back for another 5 years and you will remain a contender until, 2026? I don't know what the answer is.
I mean, have you seen Middleton's contract? That is like, I think he ends making $42 million in a few years.
Yeah, he got a max. Tobias Harris money, baby.
Yeah. Woo. And I like it, but it kind of binds the Bucks. So, and I think Middleton's contract is movable. I think there's a team that would take that, but not easily. You got to roll with Giannis and Middleton, I think, and the Brogdons and the Brook Lopez kind of shift the paradigm of these teams. But in order for those players to shift that paradigm, you have to have Giannis, right?
Well, for sure. So there's 2 simultaneous conversations going on. One is, despite losing in fairly embarrassing fashion to the Heat, are the Bucks good enough to win a title? And I think the answer is still yes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I just think the Heat were a bad matchup for 2 specific reasons. They had the kind of personnel who can guard Giannis, and they were comfortable taking 45 threes a game. There are not many other teams who fit those qualifications in the Eastern Conference. I would say Milwaukee could only have been beaten in this fashion by the Heat. I don't think the Celtics had the answer for him in the paint. I don't think Philly could take 45 threes a game comfortably. I don't think the Raptors could have defended him in this same way.
It's tough to tell. It's really tough to tell.
Absolutely. But I mean, if you were in Milwaukee, you can say, we were this good all season. But what if this happens again next year? What if we bring it back and we run into the Heat again and they do the exact same thing to us? How do we avoid that?
I mean, this
and
is yeah,
their
go ahead.
hands are kind of tied, right? Like, we got our money sunk into these guys. We've filled out the roster with some guys like Wesley Matthews and Kyle Korver, just shooters. We have a system that works, but we might just run into the Heat every year. And I think that's kind of fine. Hey, look, there's one person out there we want to avoid. Like, screw it. But the second question is Giannis down for this? Is Giannis down to stay in Milwaukee, a small market, stay with this team that hasn't been able to really get the job done despite individual accolades? Does he say, you know what? I feel the same pressure that Kevin Durant did. I want to win. I want to get that ring. I want to just cross that off my resume. LeBron did it. Durant did it. Why can't I do it? Why do I have to be the one to stay here? And I think Giannis is the kind of person where you can read it both ways. He's so boomer poisoned that he may really believe that staying for your entire career in one market is the moral way of being a basketball player and a legend. He also might think that winning a chip is really, really important to his individual resume, and therefore leaving to get a chip is fully justifiable. He doesn't strike me as someone who's going to leave to go to a big market because he thinks it'd be fun. He's not going to retire in Miami like Jimmy Butler. He's someone who is kind of trapped between two boomer paradigms.
I kind of do see him going to a market like LA, New York, hypothetically Miami, Chicago. He is very interested in branding, the Freak brand with Nike. He signed with Nike. He's on the cover of magazine. Shout out to Franchise, our buddies over there. That was an awesome issue. He's very into branding the Giannis brothers, the Antetokounmpo brothers, and I think his shoes are important. So I don't count that out, but I do agree with you in the sense that we're seeing Giannis 2, more Giannis. The first Giannis was kind of this joyful young man who was growing in the NBA. Now we're seeing a guy who maybe sees his legacy more than trying to solidify his current spot. And after winning a couple of MVPs, a Defensive Player of the Year, and not seeing postseason success with his team, he has to look at his legacy. And he's serious now, which is annoying. He's no longer this joyful guy. He's serious. So
I do think you are absolutely correct in his view of his own brand, and that he will likely end up in a big market. I agree with that, but that's also because of where some of these guys are, right? Mm-hmm. He can't go to L.A. There's not room for him money-wise as a free agent.
Unless AD, yeah, true. The timing doesn't work.
And the Nets can't do it unless they traded for him, which I guess they could
make
together
it work, right?
a reasonable offer, to be honest. If you're we'll give you Dinwiddie, we'll give you LeVert, we'll give you draft picks. They could at least...
Jared Allen.
Yeah, arguably be we'll empty everything for Giannis. There's a possibility. I think Miami and Dallas are the two places that seem most possible from a free agent standpoint. But you never know. Will Houston try to figure out a way to do it and unload Westbrook or something, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's too much speculation to get into. All that to say, I'm with you on that. I think he will likely end up in a big market. Because otherwise, why would you just not stay in Milwaukee?
Yeah, and it's tough, man. I love Milwaukee as a city. Again, shout out to Milwaukee. They got a damn lake beach with waves. But I think as a young man, especially not being an American, I think his desire to see something else in the story of his NBA career is valid. When LeBron took his talents, I kind of want Giannis to take his talents. I want to see him in a high pressure situation for sure.
While I have total sympathy for fans of a small market like Milwaukee,
yeah,
which have trouble bringing in high profile free agents, they might not necessarily have trouble. We've seen free agents go to small market teams in the past, but they are obviously less desirable of a location than New York or LA, maybe Chicago, etc. At the same time, do you really get Giannis for his entire career because you happened to pick him in the draft 10 years ago? Like, you own this guy forever because you did that? I certainly don't think so.
No, I love
You got Giannis for 8-9 years.
Yeah.
A 2-time MVP turns you into a contender. That is great value for the 16 pick in the draft or wherever he went.
Yeah. And, there's probably a stronger chance that Giannis re-signs, maybe like 60%. But convincing him to stay by surrounding himself with good players who he likes is huge. And maybe Giannis does look around and say, I love Coach Bud. I like this middleman, this maxed out middleman. I like Bledsoe. Maybe they flip Bledsoe to reacquire Malcolm Brogdon. Maybe Giannis is, and maybe a small market says to him, yo, we are going to put all of our resources into you, and you're going to have a say in all these decisions because we know that's what it takes to keep someone like you. Maybe. And, the opposite of my take of Giannis not being an American is maybe he's like, Milwaukee's really cool. It is really cool. I love that city. And he doesn't have the lure of New York because he doesn't have that weird coastal elite culture that America's grows up with.
I mean, he was also riding around in a limousine on draft day, sticking his head out the top.
Yeah.
In Times Square.
I miss that Giannis, and it wasn't going to last. No youthful personality lasts like that, but it's over. Giannis is like he wants it more kind of guy.
I'm going to cop out and go with our typical stance on this, which is I have no idea what Giannis wants.
No.
And I don't even think he knows exactly right now.
Yeah, I agree.
He should not be committal.
Yeah.
That he should not say, "Oh, I'm definitely out. I'm definitely leaving." Like, stay uncommittal. If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah. And I think he should just drag Milwaukee through the season and make them sweat it out, and just leave if he feels like it. Sort of like what LeBron did. I think the elephant in this room when we talk about hypotheticals is what Golden State will do. Only in that on draft day, I think they have two pieces in the number 2 pick and your boy Andrew Wiggins and his contract, and they're going to do something because I don't think they want either of those things, and it'll set up a kind of a weird butterfly effect into the league.
You've mentioned this before. I think that Golden State is probably in the market to resume contention and using that number 2 pick as a trade chip in that way. Mm-hmm. But I don't see Wiggins having positive value. So while you can use him to counteract, someone's contract coming back the other direction, I don't even know if the 2 pick overall is worth that.
In this draft,
I'm not totally sure. Right? Would you in essence pay LaMelo Ball like $40 million a year?
I mean, let's say
I don't know.
Let's say Golden State offers Milwaukee for the second best player in the league, the number 2 pick, which ends up being someone like Anthony Edwards. LaMelo Ball goes number 1 to the Timberwolves, another point guard, and then Anthony Edwards is sitting there, and they say you can have a couple pieces, a couple of future picks, the number 2, and Andrew Wiggins for Giannis. So you will be looking at Anthony Edwards, Andrew Wiggins, and Chris Middleton moving forward instead of losing him for nothing.
But why would anyone want Wiggins?
Just for that number 2. And it's a taste thing because the Knicks.
But then why would you give
him.
up Giannis?
Well, if you're going to lose him for nothing. Like, whatever, hypothetical.
I get that you're just putting things together, but I'm saying Wiggins is a hugely negative contract. You couldn't say, we'll give you the number 2 for Giannis, and we'll also give you a negative contract in that. Unless, of course, Milwaukee, for some reason, likes Wiggins.
Right, and that's what you have to bank on. Like, a Dolan kind of guy being like, he was the number 1 overall pick. He has highlights that are amazing. We can change him. On his contract, we're looking at 29.5, 31.5, and 33.6 until 2023. That is a lot, but it gets better every year.
Yeah, I just don't. I feel like you'd have a better chance saying, all right, we'll just give you the number 2. Then like the number 2 in Wiggins.
But then they can't, cap-wise, they can't do it.
No, I know how that works. I'm just saying, as value goes.
Yeah, just value. I mean, just value.
I mean, could you dump Wiggins' contract by attaching that number 2 pick? Is it, to me, even a bigger question on who could you get back?
Yeah, I mean, Westbrook moving from the Thunder was kind of an eye-opener. So, and Golden State knows something. They acquired Wiggins doing some due diligence. They're really smart. So I bet you they know of some interest, maybe in a relegated league, maybe in Philadelphia. But I don't think they acquired him.
Dare you?
Yeah, Wiggins is number 1. You can have Simmons and Wiggins.
Multiple number 1 picks?
Yeah. Go find Bargnani. He's around somewhere. But I think they know something, because that was such an inexplicable move, because D'Angelo Russell had value and still has value. He's a good player, and many teams would take him, and it's hard to think of which teams would take Wiggins, and that would be the Knicks, and maybe they know something. Just
to look at some of Wiggins' numbers, Golden State is a smart organization. His numbers were virtually identical there. Mm-hmm. He got to the foul line a little more. He took a few less threes, but, he stayed basically, roughly as a below average scorer by efficiency, by more composite metrics like BPM. He was virtually the same as he was in Minnesota, which was an improvement over prior years. He was a little better last year. I think he's gotten to improve at passing off the dribble a little more than he did in the past. I think his defense is slightly better. But overall, he's certainly not worth that contract.
No. Yeah, I don't know. It was such an interesting move. So that's why I think that Golden State knows he's not good. Like, it's not like the Knicks are just like, we can save him. So that's why I think like he's certainly going to move. To where, I have no idea. Maybe Sacramento might be getting smart. That might be off the table now. But, the Knicks loom.
Number 2 pick and Wiggins for Tobias Harris. Who says no?
I mean, so, yeah, the KBB, we don't want to have this discussion. But at number 2, this is a bad draft. But at number 2, you can get a guy. There's 3 prototypes. The point guard, LaMelo. The Dwayne Wade type shooting guard forward in Anthony Edwards from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Mm-hmm. He's 55 years old. And Weissman, right? Weissman's the big guy. Anthony Davis, light. So whatever you're looking for, number 2 probably will have it for you. So there's some value there for sure.
Moving along from that KBB teaser, we'll get more of that later. Yeah. More of that later. Not this show, but down the line. Very far down the line.
Well, go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about the Boston-Toronto series. They are now deadlocked at 3 games each. Toronto has always been scrambling. They've been down game after game, and it always seems like they're on the verge of being eliminated. But the heart of a champion, Kyle Lowry, it's now squared up and even. At this point, it does not feel like they're clawing from behind. It feels like maybe Toronto even has the advantage at this point, momentum-wise. I don't know. But going to a Game 7. That was a great game last night.
Incredible. I had my headphones on, and I was, like, screaming. And my wife was like, what is happening? Is everything okay? I'm like, there's a burner of a game happening.
Yeah, great game. There was some kind of dubious calls. I think overall officiating in the bubble has not been great.
They're off the game.
There's something about the lack of fans, maybe, that seems to make officials almost more aggressive in making calls, that they know there won't be like a hissy fit from 25,000 people. They kind of seem empowered to just blow whistles left and right. I mean, calling a technical on people late in games has really been something I found intolerable from the officials. Like, stop doing that shit.
Yeah. I mean, players are acting the same way, right? Like, having no fans is going to have an effect, and every game we're seeing more and more proof of that. But I agree. It's like the refs have never felt stronger.
So the question I pose to you now, if Boston loses Game 7, does this mean that the procedure is a failure?
I mean, you have to ask that question, right? Because you go into this series against the Raptors, who don't have Kawhi Leonard from last year. Pascal Siakam, as we discussed on this pod, is really good, but he's not an alpha. Kyle Lowry, wonderful player, great coach, but you should be able to take Toronto. And after seeing this series play out for 6 games, I think Boston fans could question what they do with Jason Tatum, right?
For sure, but I mean, just thinking about Boston has spent the last 10 years selling us on the procedure. You know, it took years of tanking to get here. And I know it's called the procedure. It's not about results. It's about the procedure. But at some point, you have to say, Ainge failed. This controversial, scorched earth Boston rebuild, the procedure, was a failure.
I have never seen an interaction between Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown where they seem happy. And as a Boston fan, all jokes aside, you have to wonder if they can coexist moving forward, right? Because they don't seem to like each other that much.
Looking at the body language between Daniel Theus and Kemba Walker.
I like how you made him Reggie Theus. I love
Theis.
it. Yeah,
Theis.
let's do
Theis.
this. Yeah. Theis man. Andrew Theis Clay.
Well, Reggie Theus is the father of Daniel
Oh,
Theus.
little known fact, but
Most people don't know this.
yeah.
But yeah, Theis and Kemba Walker, there's something off there. And I wonder if they like each other enough.
And yeah, I mean, this is a valid point, right? Because you're investing in these 2 young, maybe budding, awesome players. But the chemistry are they redundant? They kind of play the same space on the court. And there seems to be kind of a glut of touches, or there's a jam up in their offense when one of them is holding the ball. And they don't seem to be happy about it, man.
I mean, if you look at Tatum and Brown, why won't they pass the ball?
Oh,
I mean, are they passing with the wrong hand?
I think so. Yep.
I do wonder, like, if you could ship out one of those guys and bring back, say, like a Joe Ingles, you know, a willing passer to spread the court, I think you'd have, you know, less overlap and better spacing.
RJ Barrett's out there too. Just gonna put that out there. He can be a point guard or a passing guard, but I don't know. It's like there's a conflict of personalities, right? Because Jaylen Brown he loves the camera, he loves being in the moment, and he's amazing at it. And he has no problems taking the leadership role publicly of this team. And Tatum is more sullen and quiet, and those 2 personalities moving forward is going to be like oil and water, and that's going to show results in series against like cheeseburger players like Kyle Lowry and his wagon.
I mean, at what time do we keep trying this? If the Celtics lose, this is 3 years in a row. I mean, when do we say this doesn't work? You know, like, this core cannot coexist, and we need to make a change. We need to trade Jason Tatum for Kelly Oubre. We need to do something.
That's interesting.
We can't continue with this. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't
they
work.
don't. You can't put them on the court together. And I mean, honestly, even looking at the coaching staff, you know, the breakdowns late in games, leaving OG wide open for a corner 3, the most valuable shot in basketball. Like, you're comfortable with this guy running your offense, running your defense?
Feed Tice. Keep on feeding Tice, man.
One interesting rumor I've heard is that the Celtics could be looking at Billy Donovan potentially as a coaching replacement for Stevens, Brett Stevens.
That would be interesting because Stevens hasn't gotten the most out of his players. And I know Kemba's on contract, but and I've heard from certain sources that he's looking to retire to go to Miami. So if he finds his way and bounces to retirement with Jimmy Butler, then they're left with a coach who doesn't know how to use his two players.
He's not running enough pick and rolls, the drop coverages. He's just so predictable. He just doesn't know basketball. That's just my opinion, though. Anyway, I hope the Celtics win Game 7 and we don't have to confront these ugly realities. I hope for the sake of that core and, that coach that this organization can somehow turn it around.
I mean, all jokes aside, I'm tired of relitigating the procedure. Every year the Celtics don't win the championship, we're relitigating the years that they started the procedure at.
It's called the procedure.
Yeah.
It's about how you get there. It's about the journey and the friends and, the conventional wings to remind you of Luol Deng. It's about those that you make along the way.
I mean, the procedure kind of ended when Kyrie Irving opted out, but we're relitigating it constantly.
I agree. In reality, that was the end of the procedure.
I agree.
And also, Kyrie Irving wins.
Kyrie Irving is gonna make the procedure fans weep into their clam chowder.
Thank God they got rid of that locker room poison and brought in Kemba, who gave them 5 points in a dramatic Game 6.
Is he already retired in his head? Does he have a picture of Del Boca Vista in his bubble locker room?
He's already smoking a Cohiba and playing dominoes mentally.
Him and Jimmy are just living their best lives already, man.
You know who else is living their best life? Danwell House.
Danwell. Oh, Danwell. Why? What trouble did Danwell get into?
So apparently he was visited in his bubble hotel room, allegedly, because I believe he denies this. He was visited by a woman who is part of the COVID testing staff. And I'm going to avoid the testing staff joke. That would be uncouth. But yeah, he's been accused of this. So I guess she went and hung out with him in his hotel room, which he denies. Gotta say, is this really a crime? What did he do? What did he do that was so wrong?
I know. At what point do we put on our burger bubble cop hats and say, going to get lemon pepper wings mixed with barbecue just fucks things up and you're grounded. I think that was kind of valid. He broke the bub. This Danwell House news feels like something that we could easily just brush off and be like, hey, that's kind of against rules. We don't have to suspend you. You're a really important part of this thing that's happening soon, tomorrow, today, and just don't do it again. But
I'm sure they will make an example of him.
Yeah.
If it turns out to be true.
Yeah.
I mean, at the same time, I do have total sympathy. It's like, well, I don't know his personal situation, but if he's there in the bub and hanging out, bored, hasn't, had any, I don't even mean sex. I mean or sex, but intimacy. He's there. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have family there like other people do. Maybe he doesn't have, guests. I don't know his situation.
Yeah.
And he has a connection with a woman who's there to test people and wants to see her and hang out with her. It seems like pretty much the most natural thing in the world.
I know, and it kind of made me think of Paul George and his off-court shenanigans and how quickly we are to judge, he was dating NBA royalty, Doc Rivers' daughter, royalty, and he messed around with a dancer. And everyone really kind of took that and flew with it. But he's in love, and they have an amazing family, and it seems like he's really on point emotionally, and it's like, well, what is Danwell House doing? And I'm like, maybe he's in love, or maybe he's not. I don't have jurisdiction here.
It doesn't even need to be love.
But
Danwell
that's what
House
I'm saying.
Was lonely or horny or whatever. If he was governed by horniness, whatever.
If
but
his
Danwell
name was
House,
Daniel, yeah.
I keep calling him Daniel. Danwell.
Say his name.
But, yeah, if he was there and had a little love connection, with someone who the NBA had put into the bubble to test the players. I mean, okay, fine. Like, fine him. Don't suspend him for a freaking game.
Yeah.
You're gonna put him in quarantine for 2 weeks. Like, just stop it.
People being made an example out of kind of sucks.
Also, it's not like House has a huge contract either. Like, fine him $20,000. Let the team cover it and move on.
Yeah, I hope he plays. I'm a huge fan of Denwell on the court and off the court for that matter. So this seems like something. Yo, okay.
And to be clear, he didn't bring someone in from outside of the bub. This person was in the bub because of the NBA's way that they're handling the bubble itself. This person was deemed safe enough to put inside the bub.
So my question, maybe the overarching question is, has the bub kind of lacked some pizzazz if we're talking about this kind of stuff? Like, the games are incredible. Last night's game was a beast. That was awesome. But has the bub kind of been lacking some oomph?
I think it's pretty clear that the bub sucks.
Oh, I didn't expect that take. I kind of love the bub.
I don't mean for the product. The basketball's been fantastic. I mean, living in the bub sucks. I think the players have, for obvious optic reasons, curtailed their complaints about their living conditions and the food they're eating. But it's pretty evident that no one leaves the bub feeling like they wish they were still there.
No, it's so difficult. And I'm kind of grateful that's the take, because the risk of the bub was much different than this. And the world changed, the virus, we know more. The fact that no one's getting sick is awesome. And mental health is right up there with physical health. So, making a little barbershop is cool, but there needs to be more. And I think we found out it's like they want to be around their families.
Yeah, and I do think we've seen some really endearing footage of like Fred VanVleet's family showing up and him hanging out with his daughters. And now on the sidelines, the bub, you've got like wives, girlfriends, partners with, in some cases, like the infants that they've brought in so players can see their kids. I think that's really important. But also, it took a while to get here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, other news before, like, I don't know what else we have to talk about really here, but your guy, Michael Porter Jr., the Chad King, the Chud. After the Nuggets lost the Clippers last night, he was asked about the Clippers defense. This was the first thing they asked him. They said, well, you had 13 points or whatever it was in the first half, and you didn't score in the second. And did the Clippers do something different? He said, no, I just didn't get touches. He went on to say that the Nuggets' two stars, who are Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, were great players and all, but they couldn't do it by themselves. They needed to find their teammates. One would assume, as everyone has, that the teammates he's referring to mostly are him. Teammates such as myself, Michael Porter Jr. Is he out of line here?
No way. He's totally correct. I want every player to think this. It's awesome. Like, I don't agree with Michael Porter's politics, but this kind of prom king behavior is a gift. Let's go. Yeah, take over the game, Michael Porter. Or think you can.
Every player is supposed to say that they think they're the best on the planet until someone clearly isn't the best on the planet, and then we make fun of them. Like Donovan Mitchell, he's supposed to think he's the best out there. That's what you got to believe if you're Donovan Mitchell. And, Michael Porter Jr. says it, you're like, come on, man. Like, grow up. Be serious.
I love it. I love the specific mentality that takes, and I'm inspired by it. Because I imagine a conversation with someone like J.R. Smith going, like, him saying, no one can guard me in the league at all. I could drop 40 on any team given the chance. I'm like, well, what about your defense? He's like, yeah, I'm a great defender. I don't think about that stuff. And it's all different parameters, right? Because Michael Porter Jr.'s game is, so far in his young NBA career, is pretty limited. He's a prom king. But what a prom king. And, you know, we all aspire to be Zion levels holding that corsage. But Michael Porter is turning out to be one of the more entertaining players in the league outside of politics. And just his on-court opinions and post-game opinions are pretty great.
He's kind of Michael Beasley 2.0,
Love bees.
where we replaced stoniness and general oddness, I guess, around Beasley, who is, you know, an incredible prom king, and then a lot like Michael Porter Jr. I mean, they're very similar players in that way.
Beasley
Similar
is a
height,
walking bucket. He
walking
can score.
buckets. They're really similar in that way. But Porter Jr. is very much like the internet version of him. Like QAnon, conspiracy, anti-vaxxer, but still the same basketball prototype prom king. Just skewed in a different way. His weirdness is not that he just likes weed a lot. It's that he's too on YouTube. It's very much a generational shift between like the millennial and like the Zoomer.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he looks like a prom king. I mean, when we say prom king, it's ball related game. But like, I think where I'm going is it feels like he thinks of himself as maybe the future face of the league, because
Chris Humphries with a jumper.
Yeah, man. He is going to probably date someone famous and try to go to a big market, right?
Laura Loomer, let's go.
And
Oh God, it's happening, isn't it?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because
Ivanka's taken. Shit.
he represents a part of America that ends up in the league that doesn't quite reflect the same percentages of like political opinions. But just talking about on the court stuff, the lineage, the baton, the torch of prom king behavior has been passed, and that makes me happy. That hopefully his knees. He fell in the draft at number 14 for a reason, and I think at number 10 you could have started thinking about him. But he was supposed to be a number 1 overall until he blew out his knee and his biometrics came out. So there's a reason why he fell, and he has that chip on his shoulder. I hope he stays healthy, and I hope he has these hot takes for a decade.
In some ways, this does remind me a bit of kind of the contemporary discourse where we all made fun of Kyrie. He thinks the world is flat. Like, he's just asking questions.
Yeah.
Kyrie, oh, what a weirdo. You haven't seen anything yet. Like, check out Isaac. Check out Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
It's like the fringes just keep going further and further and further. Like, what you thought was weird is just the tip of the iceberg on where it's going to go.
Yeah, and these guys, like, I have no proof, but I think the earlier versions of the NBA were probably even more wild, and maybe not as liberal, you know, and probably definitely not as liberal. And to get to know these players is something moving forward. The league is about these players now. I think we're seeing the movement away from team alliance, and whether that be fantasy or player empowerment, whatever. I think we're very invested in these individuals as opposed to the jersey. And getting to know these guys, like Kyrie Irving is a fascinating dude. Kevin Durant is fascinating. I love them both so much. LeBron James is probably not as interesting as Giannis, but we know him back and forth. But then getting to know players like Michael Porter and Jonathan Isaac, yo, man, we're doing this, you know? Like,
that's exactly what I mean, right?
Yeah.
That Durant and Kyrie and Spencer Hawes, we thought those were the fringes of sort of odd internet-y players. Like, oh no, the internet goes way deeper. Ready for the dark web, like the deepest bowels, and we present to you Michael Porter Jr., who is of course almost mainstream in some of these beliefs.
yes, exactly.
Like QAnon, as bonkers as it obviously is, not really that like fringy.
Yeah.
You have politicians who are running for office who've won their primaries, who publicly espouse it. You have the president and people in this administration like winking at it.
Yeah.
And trying to appeal to people who believe in vast Pizzagate conspiracy theories. Also, shout out to Andrew Bogut, early influencer.
Oh,
on the,
yeah.
on the fringe conspiracy theory tip.
Influencing, yeah.
Bogfluencing.
I mean, this seems like I don't know at what point the NBA community, the active players, will reflect more of America, but to see this feels jarring. And I mean, now we're talking about his politics, but I think that's interesting, right? Because
But can his politics be separated from the personality we just saw? The guy who's basically complaining as a rookie that he's not getting enough touches in a playoff series. Like,
I mean,
are these things separable?
I think a lot of rookies want to say that. Maybe his politics involve him speaking in a different manner, but I think, like, yeah, I absolutely think Zion Williamson's like, play me 40 minutes, I'm good.
But there's certainly something about him personally that speaks truth to power.
Yeah,
as he sees it.
He might be Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, which is the NBA, where he's fighting against the tyranny of the establishment. Maybe he's Chewie. Is Michael Porter Jr. Chewbacca?
I saw Jay Caspian Kang said the over-under on teams that he's going to play for is 5.5.
Because of ownership and the
Just
politics
because
of ownership?
how long can you stomach this guy on your team? Like walking bucket, oh my God, we got to deal with him demanding touches. We got to deal with his politics in the locker room. Just like, all right, move him along. And some other teams like, he is an ambulatory vat. Yeah, we can use him. We'll figure it out.
This is the steak effect, right? This is the fancy steakhouse effect. If he's really good at walking those basketballs into that bucket, then he will have many teams to play for. If he is more like Michael Beasley, who had a very long career, I think almost 10 years, I would say, if not 10, Knicks legend, I think Porter Jr. will play on a ton of teams. It all depends on how good the steak is, right?
I mean, that was I would assume our man's Jay Caspian Kang's take was that, like, this guy's gonna have a long career getting buckets in many different places.
Would you, if he put on the red, white, and blue of the Sixers, would you root for him? Do you root for the person, the jersey, what?
Yeah, of course. You know, I think I don't think belief systems are the same as actions, right? You know, I have more trouble rooting for someone like Derrick Rose. I don't want him on a team that I am vested in his success because I don't think he's a good guy. I think Michael Porter Jr. having what I consider ridiculous beliefs is like, fine, who cares?
Yeah, he's also a young man.
But I just mean,
yeah.
I may not like him, but he didn't do anything wrong. At the same time, I guess it does change if someone, say, voiced like really racist beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, like the receiver on the Eagles, several years back, a white guy like yelled like the N-word.
Riley Cooper.
Yeah, like, do you want to root for that guy? No.
No,
I think there's a difference between like that, which is a form of abuse and violence, and just having like dumbass takes.
Yeah, without getting too stony with it, like, even saying some takes is action. That is action. Like, talking is action. Tweeting is action. Michael Porter Jr. saying, give me the rock, that's action. He doesn't have to shoot the rock, you know? But that's way too stony. I think everything is kind of on a spectrum.
He's potentially on the spectrum, I hear you. No,
Hey,
not making mental illness jokes here. I'm just like,
Well,
he's a little unique.
Well, talking about players and getting to know them, I just watched the Architectural Digest YouTube of Kevin Love and his house. I believe it's Architectural Digest. And, you know, he came out last year being like, well, I want to lead the charge with mental illness awareness in the NBA. Awesome. I'm all for that. His house is very unique. He is not your normal homie. He has all these contraptions in it, like like futuristic sleeping arrangements, like bubbles, like coolers. It looks like a science lab in his house. It's really fascinating, and it's a beautiful house. He's got a beautiful dog, but it was really interesting to see somebody show us these things that he thinks are very normal. And I'm like, whoa, he's way out there. He's like, well, I kind of spend 3 hours in this biometric chamber, and then I sleep in this bub.
But is that out there for being someone who makes a living playing basketball, that is in his 30s, I think, at this point, and needs longevity and only has a specific window for earning potential? Like saying, all right, I'm going to invest in a hyperbaric chamber. I'm going to invest in all of these technological, vampire coffins and aged that are designed to make me age less swiftly and recuperate better. Is that even weird? Because I think LeBron kind of lives the same way, right?
Oh yeah, and I think most of these players would, but I'm not really privy to this technology. Like, I know every locker room has those weird freezers that you poke your head out of, and it, shoots down your body temperature. I don't want you cryogenic. Is that what you call it? But just seeing the way he lived, I was like, I wasn't weirded out at all, but I was interested in his commitment to his craft. And Architectural Digest just did a Scottie Pippen one, which is also fascinating. His gym is hilarious. It's like a bunch of dumbbells that he looks like he hasn't touched, and like a treadmill that he has, like, the classic, like put stuff on, but he doesn't really prioritize it in the same way an active star like Kevin Love did. But and technology has changed in 30 years, but I was just really into the idea of him being a nerd, like an athletic nerd who wants every advantage possible.
Makes sense. I wonder, without getting into like Kevin Love's, next moves, he's a kind of enticing trade target.
Oh man, I mean, I was joking with you a couple days ago. I kind of see him on the Sixers, like the Al Horford 2, more Horf. He's good.
He is a forward.
He is a potato pancake in a bagel.
Van Vliet, Kevin Love, Gallo. New York Knicks, 7 seed. Let's go!
And Ben Simmons.
And Tobias Harris.
I would take that team in a hot second. That sounds like a good-ass team, man.
Perfect team for the perfect pot.
Cookies.
Cookies!
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.